In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 really cool and simple tips that will help you take better photos with your Canon DSLR camera. Hi, Paul here from PhotoGenius. Now this channel is dedicated to helping you get more from your digital camera. I share photography tutorials, tips, tricks and occasional gear reviews. So if you're new, consider subscribing. Today's video is all about Canon DSLR cameras, and what I've got to share with you today is 5 really cool and very simple tricks that will just help you take better photos and get more from your camera. Let's get straight into it with tip number 1, which is all about playing back images. Now at the weekend, I did a photography workshop and one lady in my group wanted to show me an image. She had taken this image some weeks ago. It hadn't turned out the way she planned, so she wanted some tips on how she could improve things moving forward. So she had pressed playback on the back of the camera. She was skipping through the images and it was taking ages to find this one image. So using a very simple trick, I was able to show her and you guys how to find an image really quickly. Press the playback button and you can skip through your images one at a time, but a quicker and more effective way of looking for specific images is to press the minus button, shrink the images down to thumbnails, and you can now skip through much quicker. This is a great time-saving technique. So I hope you enjoyed that first tip. It certainly can be a big time saver. My next tip is about ISO, or basically giving you a shortcut to ISO. Now ISO is a way of controlling light. Increase the number, picture gets brighter. Decrease the number, your picture will get darker. In fact, it's one of 3 ways of controlling light alongside aperture and shutter speed. Now, if you're less familiar with ISO, don't worry about it too much. I've done a separate video on it. You might want to check it out. I'll put a link up here. If you do know about ISO, then you've probably already discovered that there's an ISO button on the camera. Unlike some other camera manufacturers, Canon are really cool and they make it generally pretty easy to get to and change your ISO. So as long as you're in the manual functions, you can press the ISO button, which is usually on the top, or in the case of this camera, on the back of the camera. So changing ISO is easy, but I'm going to show you a way of possibly making it even easier. On the top of this camera, which is the T6 1300D, there's a flash button. Now generally when I press the button, the flash would pop up. Now because I'm not a big user of the flash, what I've done is I've got into the settings inside the camera and I've changed it. So instead of pressing this button and the flash popping up, it's another way of accessing the ISO. And I do find pressing the top button and then turning the wheel to change the ISO easier than using the button on the back. Let me show you how I did it. To customize the flash button, press the menu, look for custom functions, press set, skip through until you see flash button function, press set, select ISO speed, press set. Now, when you press the flash button on the top of the camera, you will have an option of changing the ISO by turning the wheel on the top of the camera. Now I do appreciate that some of you will already have Canon cameras with an ISO button on the top, so that particular tip may not apply to you, but it's worth having a look at the custom functions inside your camera because there's some other things you can do and it's a pretty cool way of customizing your camera so it's easier to use, it's more user friendly. Now my next tip is about adding effects to your images. Did you know that there are creative filters built into your camera? So after you've taken a picture, you can apply these creative filters to your images, much like you would do if you're using something like Instagram. Let me show you how it's done. So press the playback button and we've already selected an image. This is of our new office dog Boo. All we need to do here is press our Q button and this brings up a menu. From here you can do various things including locking your images so they can't be deleted from the card, rotating images, applying ratings to images, and below that we find creative filters, of which there are 5 to choose from. First one is grainy black and white, which will obviously turn the image black and white and add grain. If we press set, we've got 3 different options which we can apply. I'm not going to apply these because I'm going to take you through all the different options. So if I press set, it would apply. If I press menu, we get to go back and take a look at the next option. This is soft focus, which probably would suit portraits better. If we press the set button, once again, very easy. We've got 3 different levels to choose from. I'm not going to set this, so menu once again. The next one is fisheye effect. This is kind of fun, and this will give you an effect that is very similar to using a fisheye lens. The more we apply, the more bendy and rounded off the image will look. This can kind of look fun with portraits, and in this case a picture of a dog. Press the menu button again, and the next one is toy camera effect, which adds an effect similar to some filters that you might find on Instagram. 3 different tones to choose from. It's pretty cool. Menu once again, and finally this is the miniature effect. Now miniature effect can be really good when you're shooting from a high vantage point, and what you do is you use the up and down arrows to move this section, and this is where things will be in focus. So anything will be in focus if it falls in this rectangle. Outside of the area you will get a blur effect, so we can move it up and down to set it on the eyes, which is obviously quite important. If I press set, it would save the change. Again, I'm not going to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the fisheye effect, because I think this is kind of fun. Press set, choose the effect. I'm going to go for maximum. Press set again, and what you'll see here is that we can save this as a new file, so we don't overwrite the original image. Press OK, and it's done. Now playing around with the filters can certainly be a lot of fun, and what I particularly like is that you can save your changes as a separate file. You still get to keep your original image, which is great. Now my next tip is all about exposure compensation. This is a function that allows you to control and affect your exposure. So let me say, for example, you take a picture and when you look at it you feel that a slightly brighter picture would have been better. Well, you can retake the picture, you can adjust the exposure compensation and actually get your camera to overexpose, which makes the picture brighter. But of course you can also make your picture underexposed, which can make your picture darker. This is a really cool mode. Now to use this you really need to be out of auto. On the camera there is a dial on the top. This allows you to change the modes, and the 3 modes in which this will work are AV, aperture priority, TV shutter priority, and P for program. Let me show you how it's done. Adjusting exposure compensation couldn't be easier using the plus minus button. All I need to do is hold the button down, dial to the right to increase exposure, dial to the left to decrease exposure. You'll notice the camera's meter reacting. As I dial to the right, the marker moves to the right, indicating overexposure, dialing to the left for underexposure. Easy. So I hope you'll enjoy playing around and using exposure compensation. Personally, I use it quite a lot when I'm shooting sports, because although I do like to shoot a lot in manual, when I'm doing sports, shutter priority, which is TV on the Canon dial, is really, really useful. And exposure compensation and shutter priority work really well together. Okay, now let's take a look at exposure lock. Now to use this mode you need to be in one of the creative modes. So this on a Canon is AV TV or P for program. And to activate this, look for a button on the back of the camera that has an asterisk above it. To activate this mode, all you need to do is hold down the button. Now exposure lock does exactly what it says. If you're holding the exposure lock button down on the back of the camera, your exposure will be locked and will remain the same, even if you choose to then recompose before you take the photo. So you do the exposure lock before you do your focusing and before you actually take your image. This can be particularly useful if you're shooting a subject that is backlit, or maybe if you're working in contrasting light, and you can use this for effect. So just to recap, you point your camera at the light that you want the camera to expose for. You hold down the exposure lock and the camera's exposure will remain the same. After that you can recompose the photo, the exposure won't change, but you can focus and take the picture. Check it out, it's a good feature. So if you've enjoyed this video and you've picked up some cool tips for taking better photos with your Canon camera, please give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel, and you can leave your comments, questions or suggestions down below. I hope to see you again sometime soon. See ya, bye.